How you guys doing today? This is Big Dog General coming to you from my YouTube channel. Brother looking a little rough this morning. Need shave or whatever, but hey, none of us are perfect. Um, this particular video, I was sitting here having a conversation with a friend of mine, my ex, and we were talking about moments that define leaders. And what made me a leader was how I took, for people who don't know me, is how I took, a name or a brand that I built. You know, one of the most successful, swinging outfits, in the DMV area, and I did it consistently for about a good 7, 8 years. You know, throwing parties, filling hotels, selling out hotels. Filling out, 2, 3 floors of people consistently, selling 70, 80 rooms consistently every other month, for like 5 years straight, you know, um, house parties and all the things of that nature that have been full or packed and things of that nature. And of course, you have some hit or misses like with anything. Nothing is absolute, nothing is perfect. But we were just talking about, and then when I was, a teenager, I had my little outfit in the street, the little crew that we ran and robbed stuff and things of that nature, and sold drugs and all types of shit like that. So I've always been in that position of being more so a leader, than a follower. So we were having, and I'm also currently a business owner and an entrepreneur. I have my own commercial cleaning business, and I run that as well, and it's becoming successful. We started from the ground up a year or so ago, and as well as my ex, her business as well. She's had her business successfully for 5 years, and she makes well over 6 figures, or it has. I mean, it didn't start that way. But it starts from a building point and how you create it to where you become a successful person that's eating literally off of your own hands, in your own work that you put out and your energy that you put out into the universe. So we were just sitting here talking about defining moments that create leaders. And one of the things that, I had discussed and it was in my defining moment was that moment when my mother came to me and she told me that, she couldn't buy me school clothes and school shoes, and for the new year. And I was 14 years old and getting ready to go into my what is that? Junior? No, no, not junior. With the freshman, sophomore. Yeah, sophomore year. I was getting ready to go into my sophomore year in high school, and yeah, I was devastated. I was devastated because I was used to being in that normal rhythm of when it's time to go to school, you get new clothes and shoes. Always got to make a nice appearance, look fresh, and things of that nature as a child. That's what I was used to. That's what I was accustomed to. And all of us were as children. And to this day, they are. That's always been the way things go.
Mhm.
Time to go to school, time to get new clothes and shoes. Christmas, new clothes, new shoes. Holidays is always new clothes, new shoes. Birthdays, new clothes, new shoes. That's the way it is when you're a child. So when I was told I wasn't getting that, at that point, I wasn't worried about being in the street. I wasn't worried about no drugs, no hustling. The kids that had money, I had classmates. I grew up in Southside Richmond, Virginia, back in the '90s. And back then, times were a lot worse than they are now. Of course, VCU has taken over majority of the city now. You know, um, but yeah, it's not those times back then. Back then, it's a lot darker. You know, and the accessibility to sell drugs and you know get into all kinds of criminal activity was a lot higher than it is now, and it wasn't a lot of avenues for youth to really do anything positive, or really was nothing for us to do, period, constructive, unless you played football or you stayed after school in some of the programs that they had. Outside of that, most of us ain't want to do that shit. You know what I'm saying? We wanted to have fun. We wanted to do other things. You know what I'm saying? But when it came to a point where we got older, like I said, money wasn't on our mind. Like I had one when I was in the 10th grade. That very same year, I didn't have any school clothes and shoes. I was in typing class, and my classmate asked me for change for 50 in the 10th grade.
Hmm. That would have blew my mind.
He asked me for change for a 50
Hmm.
in the 10th grade. So I was like, huh? He's like, yeah, I ain't got nothing smaller than a 50. And when the nigga had opened his hand, he had a wad with rubber bands around it that was about this wide in his pocket. It looked like a little drum for a 30 round clip drum that you stick in the bottom of a gun. That's how big his knot was. And he was only 15, 16 years old. So that was the first time I got, introduced into, money and how important money was to people. But, that was right after my mother told me she couldn't buy me clothes and shoes. I saw that. So that was another moment where it was put in my face that there's people out here making money
My age.
my age like that.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on?
Give me that.
You know
Give
what
me
I'm
that.
saying? And I'm
Hmm.
sitting here broke with no clothes and no shoes, struggling. And this nigga got the nerve to ask me for a change for 50, and I'm getting free lunch. So yeah, at that point, and then I had another classmate who he pulled a wad of money out of his pocket. We in homeroom. He pulls a wad of money out of his pocket. Him and I sit in the back of the homeroom class and cut up because you only sit in homeroom if you take roll and then you leave and go to another period. So he pulls out a knot out of his drawers. And I was like, oh my fucking God. Like, why are people pulling out money all over the place? Like, what the fuck am I missing? You know? And the one time I had ever seen crack before, I was 12 years old the first time I saw crack.
Hmm.
And I saw it on a school bus when I lived in Bladensburg, Maryland, back in 89, 90. 1989, 1990. I was staying in Bladensburg, Maryland, and my mother was in Saudi Arabia. So I had to leave Virginia and come up here and come to Maryland for a year or two until my mother came back from deployment from the first Desert Storm War. And this is when I was in middle school. And one of my classmates on the bus, Asian cat. This cat was Asian. Like he wasn't even a brother. He was Asian. He had the fresh starter jackets. He had the fresh Jordans.
What?
He had the fresh gold chain. And this Bama had vials of crack all in his pocket. And I was in middle school. This cat was 13, pulling out vials of crack,
Mm.
talking about some getting his work. So a lot of kids that are out there now, thank God they were not subjected to that kind of shit that I was subjected to, or kids like myself that were subjected to that. Which is why, a lot of us go the way we are. So
Yeah.
therefore, there are moments that define who you are and what you do. And that was one of the defining moments because it had constantly been placed in front of me. It had constantly been placed in
Hmm.
front of me, constantly. It got placed in front of me at 12. It turned around and got placed in front of me again at 14. Then once I began 14 in the south side of Richmond back then, everybody was selling drugs. Everybody had Figaro chains. Everybody had Cuban links. Everybody had cars, whatever the case may be. And they were drug dealers. So unless your people had money and you came from the county and you just so happen to be going to Huguenot because it's on the line, of Richmond, of the city Richmond limits versus the county. So you could get away with being a kid, coming over there, being around the other hood kids, if you come from a little bit of money because your people wanted you to go to that school for whatever reason. So I say all that to say there's a lot of reasons why we do the things that we do and we become the way we become. And if you sit back and you analyze it, people always ask themselves, well, how do we get this way? Or how did that person get this way? How do I get that way? Why is my attitude this bad? When this goes back into self-actualization and doing self-reflections, you're like, well, where did this come from? You know, that's why I always tell people history is very important, because if you don't know where you came from, you won't know where you're going. And you won't know who you are. So you have to do that. You have to sit back and you have to ask yourself, if you're a leader, what made me become a leader? What made me want to do that? And one of the things that made me want to do that was knowing that I lived in this bubble of not having to be obligated to provide for myself for 13, 14 years. Is now gone. That veil is gone at 14 years old.
Right.
There is no more veil. There's no more Santa Claus. There's no more nothing. All there is at that point is reality.
Survival mode.
And survival mode kicks the fuck in.
Yeah.
And if you are a leader, your survival mode will kick in. If you are prey or a follower, you will just be satisfied with the status quo.
Yeah. Say fuck it, give up.
And that is just life in general. That is people in general. That is how we are. That is how we are created. These are the elements and things that create the people and shape the minds that we are now. And how you respond. How you respond to your challenge or what is put in front of you is what makes you who you are. Always remember that. Even now to this day, challenges still come at me left and right. Being a 6-time felon, 6 felonies on my jacket, in one case. You know how that goes. So yeah, they're always going to be challenges. With my attitude, because of the things that happened to me in my childhood, or the things that happened to me while I was becoming an adult, growing up in prison, things of that nature. So yeah, inevitably, there's stuff that's stuck in front of you, and how you respond to it is what makes you who you are and puts you where you end up being. So remember that every day that you live.